Thank you so much for taking the time to join so we could learn about Chanukah. I hope everyone's having a wonderful Chanukah and basking in the glow of the Chanukah candles. All right, hope everyone is safe and well. And I feel like this year we really need the lights of Chanukah to give us a boost. And hopefully Chanukah should be kind of an inflection point, should be a turn for our community, for the world, in the right direction for us to get through this tough time. All right, so we all know that we celebrate 8 days of Chanukah, and we light the candles in accordance with Beis Hillel, lighting upwards in number every single night. Now, we know that there's 8 days of Chanukah, and the classic question is asked by the Beit Yosef, or Yosef Karo, about the 8 days of Chanukah. He says that, based on the Gemara, based on tradition, the Hashmonaim, after the revolt against the Syrian Greeks, against the Seleucid kingdom, so they were able to rededicate the sanctuary. And when they purified the sanctuary, and by the way, one thing that they were not able to purify was the altar. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah says that they were not able to purify the stones of the altar, and for that reason they had to bury the stones and rebuild a new altar. So Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says maybe that's the reason why we have donuts on Chanukah. Of course, the classic reason is because donuts, one key ingredient of donuts is the oil, which is of course the miracle of Chanukah. But Rosh Shlomo Zalman, I think we might have mentioned this yesterday, says that the reason why you have this minhag to have donuts is because that requires you to make an alamichya. And in the alamichya bracha, as opposed to benching makes no mention of the altar. But in the alamichya, which you say after mezonot, so then you say al mizbechacha ve'alechalecha. You pray for the altar, and we're sad for the fact that we don't have the mizbech, the altar and the sacrifices, and we pray for the rebuilding of the altar. So maybe that's why we have a minhag to have donuts. My son asked me a good question, which is, then we should have had pasta, because pasta also requires you to make an alamichya. So that's a good question. But the classic question that's asked by the Beit Yosef is why there are 8 days of Chanukah? Because when the Hashmonaim were victorious and they restored their political sovereignty, which was a very significant moment, and when they purified the temple, they found 1 jug of oil that was supposed to last 1 night, based on natural reasons. Should have lasted 1 night, and that 1 jug of oil that was 1 day's supply lasted an entirety of 8 nights. And the joke is said about, if you want to kind of recognize what kind of miracle it was, think about your cell phone, right? If it's on 5% battery and it lasts on and on and on for 8 days, that's now you have a picture of the miracle of Chanukah. But so Chanukah, it was supposed to last 1 day, and it lasted a total of 8 days. So really there were 7, right? It really should be 7 days of Chanukah, because it was really 7 days of miracle. So one answer given is that the 7 days are to celebrate the miracle of the oil, and 1 day is to celebrate the military victory, which was a major, a major accomplishment, and a tremendous feat for the Hashmonaim, who were fewer in number, weaker in terms of their weapons, and they were able to overcome the Seleucid kingdom led by Antiochus Epiphanes. So 7 days is for the oil, 1 day is for the military victory. But the question is, so that's why we have 8 days of Chanukah, and there's a lot of different answers to that question as to why it's 8 as opposed to 7. But how do we fulfill the mitzvah of Chanukah candles? Now you might think that is pretty straightforward, right? You have your Chanukah, and every single night you light parallel to the number of nights, but it's really not so simple. By the way, Rav Soloveitchik says that you don't even need the Chanukah to fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. That really the key is the candles, and you put the candles on a piece of tinfoil, and that's a way to fulfill the mitzvah. But it's not so simple, because the Gemara says that you fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. Marvin, welcome, good to see you. Marvin is on board, and Susan is on board, and everyone else also. So thank you so much for joining. So the Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos that you fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah by lighting one candle each night per household. The way the Gemara says it is that it's Ner Ish Ubeito, one candle per household. Now, even though we do much more than that, but that line in the Gemara, determines the halacha in the sense of that you fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah only in your house, right? You're not really supposed to do the mitzvah of Chanukah, and you don't fulfill the mitzvah in somebody else's house. You only fulfill it in your house or where you're sleeping that night. Because if you're sleeping in a hotel or you're sleeping by somebody else, then that becomes your house, that particular night. The only exception to that is the shul. We light the menorah in the shul every evening with a bracha. And now that we're outdoors in Jacob's garden, so Rav Shechter paskin that we don't say a bracha because it doesn't have the sanctity of a shul since we're outside. But when we're inside the shul, between Mincha and Ma'ariv every single night, we light the candles with a bracha. Why do we do that? The reason for that is because this is to remember the original miracle which took place with the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. We don't have a Beis Hamikdash, but we do have the privilege to have a Beit Knesset, which is considered a miniature temple. And so we light the menorah in the shul really to memorialize the miracle of the menorah which took place in the original shul in the Beit Hamikdash. The other reason why we light in the shul is because the Gra points out that whenever we publicize a miracle as an individual, we try to do so also as a community. We do this Pesach night where we have the Seder at home as an individual, as a family, where we publicize the miracles of Pesach and we express our gratitude for that. But in shul, on Pesach night, we beforehand, right before the Seder, we do something unusual, which is that we say Hallel. Most shuls have the custom to say Hallel on the Seder night in shul after davening. Why? Because since we're going to publicize the miracle as a family in our homes, we also should do it together as a community, which is what we do when we say Hallel. Similarly, on Chanukah, right? We light the Chanukah in our homes to publicize the miracle, the miracles of the events of Chanukah. And so we also do it as a community when we light the menorah in shul every single night of Chanukah. Now, there's an interesting debate between Lubavitcher Rebbe and most other rabbis, including Rav Soloveitchik. Lubavitcher Rebbe was of the opinion that just like you can light the menorah in the shul, so too you can light in a public park, or a public square, because that also publicizes the miracle, right? And that's the approach of Chabad, where they under normal circumstances in most years, this year, of course, everything is upended, everything is different, but most years, right, people, they gather together in a park or in a public place, and they light the menorah with a bracha because they're publicizing the miracle. But Rav Soloveitchik and many other rabbis disagreed very, very strongly, vehemently, and said that no, you only fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah in your house. The only exception to your house is the shul, because that's where the original miracle of Chanukah occurred in the Beis Hamikdash, and the shul is a miniature Beis Hamikdash. So, and so that's something very, very important for us to understand, that you fulfill the mitzvah in the bayis, in your house. And really, Chanukah, this is kind of parenthetical, but I think this is interesting, which is that Chanukah celebrates the strength and the importance of the Jewish home. And that we, the ideal place for the menorah is actually outside the door. Us in the diaspora, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but we light inside the house. We'll talk a little bit about why we do that. We light inside the house. Now the custom is we light inside the house, but by the window. So we're lighting inside, but it's by the window to also publicize the miracle and to spread the light to outside the house as well. But the ideal place, guys and gals, the ideal place to light the menorah is really by the entrance to the house, outside the doorway. In fact, in Eretz Yisrael, that's the way everyone lights, and even some people in the diaspora in the United States light outside the doorway. And the ideal way to do it when you light outside the doorway is the mezuzah on one side. The mezuzah is on the right side, right? And what you do is you put the menorah on the left side. Why do you do it that way? So because you want to surround the doorway with mitzvot. But I also heard another beautiful answer, which is that the right has preference in Jewish tradition. So when you go inside the house, you should see the mezuzah. That reminds you of your, the mission of your family and the ideals and principles that you build your home in accordance with, right? So you pass the mezuzah, which has the two parashiyot of Shema, and then on your way outside the house, then you see the Chanukah menorah on your right side, because that reminds you how you have to stay committed to Judaism even in the outside world, right? The Chanukah celebrates the perseverance of the Masorah in the face of the juggernaut of Hellenism, and it celebrates the ability of the Chashmonaim to overcome the decrees, to overcome the Hellenization, to overcome all the influences. And so Chanukah is a lot about the house, but also inspiring us to stay committed outside the house. But if we think about the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, that the baseline level of the mitzvah is one candle for the household each night, and the mitzvah is fulfilled in the household. So this is just I think that's important to understand as a halachic from a halachic perspective, but I think it's also emphasizing that the Jewish home is the secret to our success, and that the petach habayit, the entrance to the home, that's where the menorah goes ideally. Why? Because the doorway to the house is the gateway. That's the firewall of the house, and that's the most critical place, because it can't be a solid wall, right? Because you have to be engaged with the outside world, but also it can't be porous and be an open channel, right? So you have to really be careful to understand what you're allowing into the house and what you're not allowing into the house, and that's a lot what Chanukah helps us navigate, which is, how do we build a strong Jewish home with all the different influences out there in the world, and also, right, how the person stays committed to Torah when you are out there in the world. So it's both the house and outside the home, but certainly the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah highlights the importance of the bias of the Jewish home, and having a strong Jewish home where all of you are keeping kosher, keeping Shabbos, making sure that we, of course, having a mezuzah, and of course, building your, living in your home in accordance with the Torah and with Jewish values. That is a key theme of Chanukah. So that's the lowest. That's the baseline level of fulfilling the mitzvah of Chanukah, one candle per household. The second level, the Gemara says that for those who want to pursue mitzvot and want to do the mitzvah in a higher level, it calls it the Mahadrin. And the Mahadrin, right, those who want to do the mitzvah in a preferable way, should light Ner L'Kol Echad Ve'echad. They should light one candle for each and every person in the household. Okay, so this is important to have a clear understanding. The bottom baseline level is what? One candle per household. The Mahadrin, which is preferable, is every single person lights one candle each night, each of the 8 nights of Chanukah. Okay, here we go. Now, the Gemara then says something. The Gemara then says, Mahadrin mina Mahadrin, for those who want to do it the best of the best, the frum of the frum, right? They want to do it in the best possible way. So then you do it parallel, right? Parallel to the number of nights. And here, within this level, you have a debate between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai says you go downward a number, because he focuses on how many days are remaining of Chanukah. So on the first night you light 8 because there's 8 days to go. And the second night you light 7 because there's 7 days to go. And the third night you light 6 because there's 6 days to go. And the second reason for Beit Shammai is because he says that it's similar to the bulls on Sukkot that go downward in number. And just like the sacrifices of the bulls on Sukkot goes from 13 to 12 to 11 to 10, etc. So too, Beit Shammai makes an interesting connection here between Sukkot and Chanukah. Sukkot is 8 days, Chanukah is 8 days. It could be, perhaps, that the Chashmonaim that year were not able to observe the 8 days of Sukkot, and maybe that's one of the reasons why they established 8 days of Chanukah. But Beit Shammai says that you should go downward in number. And Beit Hillel disagrees. And we're well aware of the position of Hillel. And normatively speaking, we follow Hillel like we do in almost all the debate between Shammai and Hillel. And Hillel says, no, you go upwards in number, right? And why? Because you count what day of Chanukah are you up to? Day 1, right? So it's the first day, and now we're up to the second day, and now we're up to the third day. Now we're up to the fourth day. He doesn't want to look at how many days we have remaining. He wants to look at how many days do we have under our belt. And the second reason for Beit Hillel is beautiful, where he says that in Judaism, you have to go upwards in number. Why? Because the Malin B'Kodesh, very good, Ayala and Ran, Malin B'Kodesh, V'lo Moridin. Right? We want to go upwards in holiness and not downwards. As a Jew, it's not just what we've accomplished, in all of you have accomplished a tremendous amount, but we want to accomplish even more. We want to grow even further, right? It's not just where you are, but what direction are you heading in? And so in Judaism, it's always important to go upwards in holiness, to try to keep getting better and better. I think it was the Pablo Casal, who was an Italian cellist, who practiced for hours and hours a day. And they asked him, Pablo, you're the greatest cellist in the world. Why are you practicing? And he said, you want to know why? Because I think I can get even better. And that's the approach of a Jew. A philosophy of a Jew is, as great as you are, and each of you is a great Jew. Look, Tuesday night, the dead of the winter, you're studying Torah. We're studying Torah together. So that's just another indication that you're a great Jew. So you're a great Jew, but a Jew always thinks that we can get a little better. And Beit Hillel says that we go upwards in the candles of Chanukah because we always want to go upwards in holiness and not the other way around. Fine. So if I were to ask you, how do you fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, what would you say? Well, Linda and Dick, welcome. And Susan, good to see you if I didn't recognize you yet. So if I were to ask you, how do you fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah? So if based on this Gemara, there's 3 different levels. Baseline level is 1 candle per household. Preferable Mahadran is every single person lights a candle. And the third level is Mahadran and Mahadran is to light parallel to the number of nights, which according to Beit Hillel is to go upwards in number. Now here's the question. What's the question about the third level? The question is the third level of Mahadran and Mahadran, is that building upon the second level or circumventing it? Is the third level, the highest level, highest of the highest, is that presupposing the second level? Or is it going back and building upon the first? What do I mean by that? Ayala, go ahead.
So I think it's building on the previous level. It's taking the one, but making it better, getting one for each night and going up, as Beit Hillel says we should do, and that's for each person. So I guess that makes it a Mahadran min a Mahadran.
Got it. So what you're saying is that it's presupposing the second level. In other words, it's building upon the second level. So it's that every single person should light parallel to the number of nights.
Right.
Right? The first level is 1 candle per household. Second level is 1 candle per person. And the third level is to light parallel to the number of nights. that every single person should light parallel to the number of nights.
Correct.
The other possibility, Ron, yeah, go ahead.
But actually, mehadrin mina mehadrin is actually more than that. It's not lighting candles, it's lighting the olive oil. That is the mehadrin mina, rather than using candles. But I give you an example of the difference. In Sephardic household, you don't light a shamash. You light it either with another candle or with a match. And also in Sephardic household, you light one for the whole family. In Ashkenazic, you light one for each member, usually.
You
Okay,
don't
Ron,
have
we're gonna come back.
to.
Yeah. I'm
But
telling you, I'm from my house. That's
We're
what
going
we
to
used
come
to
back.
do.
We're going to come back to that point, and that's my understanding as well. And we're going to come back to that second point that you just said, and that's actually a key
But
part.
olive oil is mehadrin.
Right. So that's actually a key part of the Shiur. We're going to get back to that second point. And in terms of your first point, Ron, so your first point is that's very interesting. I actually learned that the Sephardim, that there are some Sephardim that light the shamash at the end or don't light it at all. And I guess there's two reasons. There's two reasons for the shamash. One reason is to use the shamash to light the other candles. And the other reason for the shamash is that we're not supposed to benefit from the illumination of the candles. And right, because the candles are holy and sacred. So we're not supposed to utilize it for personal use. Similar to the candles in the menorah in the temple, right? You're not supposed to use it for mundane personal purposes. So since the candles are like the candles of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, and also because the purpose of the candles is to publicize the miracle, so that's why you're not supposed to benefit from the illumination of the candles. If a person were to benefit accidentally, that's why you have the shamash. There's the shamash is there so that if a person benefits from the illumination of the candles, we say that you're benefiting really from the shamash. So according to the Sephardim, it seems like they emphasize that second reason. According to Ashkenazim, we light the shamash first, and then use the shamash to light the other candles with an oil menorah. And when I say candle, I mean wick. When I say candle, I don't mean wax candle. I mean a candle could, of course, be lit by olive oil, which is the nicest way to do it if you can. But the idea of the oil is the shamash has two reasons. The shamash, right? Ashkenazim use the shamash to light all the other candles, but the Sephardim don't do that. I guess the Sephardim are emphasizing the second reason, the shamash, which is that it serves as any illumination for people who benefit from the light of the candles. They're benefiting from the light of the shamash. So that's interesting, Ron. I also learned that the Sephardim have an interesting custom to light the shamash last. Some people say, wait a second, what's that all about? The whole purpose of the shamash, they think, is to light the other candles, but really there's that other reason for the shamash. Okay, wonderful. But getting back to the Mahadrim and the Mahadrin, which you're all getting excited about, and you're all wondering, wait a second, that's such a fascinating question. Is the third level building on the second level, or is it building on the first level? So Ayala says that it's building on the second level. That, right, the second level says every single person should light a candle, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a moment. Aside from the fact that I think it's interesting, but we're going to see that there's a very, very interesting, very interesting anomaly about this particular law, because Ayala says that the baseline level is one candle, higher level is every single person lights a candle, and the highest of the highest is that every single person lights parallel to the number of nights. And indeed, this is the position of the Ramah. It's really the position of the Rambam. And so the Rambam says that if it's the fourth night and there's 5 people, they should light 20 candles. And if it's the 6th night, like it is tonight, and there's 3 people in the house, they should light 18 candles. If it's 1 person in the house, he lights 6 candles. If it's 2, 12. If it's 3, 18. So that's the Rambam. However, the other possibility is what? Is that no, that the third level, the highest of the highest level, is circumventing the second level. It's building upon the first level. and that you have the bottom baseline level is 1 candle per household. And that could be enhanced in one of two possible ways. One way to enhance it is that every single person lights a candle. And the other way to enhance it is that just one person lights, but one person lights parallel to the number of nights. This is the position of Tosfos. Tosfos, who are the Ashkenazic rabbis in the 12th century, the earliest authors of Tosfot were the grandchildren of Rashi. The Balei Tosfos, the authors of Tosfos, say that the highest of the highest level is to light one Chanukah. Why does he feel that you should light one Chanukah? That you should light parallel to the number of nights, but that one person lights parallel to the number of nights. Why? Because what's the whole idea of Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel? It seems like there's a value in knowing what night it is, and you want to convey that message to people that tonight is the 6th night. But Marvin, if you have 18 candles in the front, if you have 12 candles in front of the house or in the window, wait, what night is it? Is it the 2nd night, and it's and it's a big family? Maybe it's the 1st night and it's a Hasidish family with and there's 12 people, or maybe it's the 2nd night and there's 6 people in the family. Maybe it's the 6th night and it's 2 people and it's a couple who are living together. So Tosfos says that if you're going to light multiple sets of candles, everyone's going to be confused. The people the pedestrians walking on the street will not know what night it is. This goes against the idea of Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai, which is to convey that message of how many nights it is. What you see from here is that there's a major debate between the Rambam and Tosfot how to understand the highest level of fulfilling Ner Chanukah. According to the Rambam, it's that you light parallel to the number of nights multiplied by the amount of people lighting. Another way to say it is that every single person lights parallel to the number of nights, or lights a Chanukah, right? And lights a Chanukah the way we usually understand it. Tonight they light 6 candles, and the other person lights 6 candles. The other person lights 6 candles plus the shamash. And Tosfos disagrees and says that no, that you light 1 Chanukah. Now here's where it gets even more interesting, because what's the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch? Now the Mechaber, so the Shulchan Aruch was written by Rav Yosef Karo in the 1500s. Rav Yosef Karo was a Sephardi from Spain who ended up in Eretz Yisrael, and he was someone who followed the Sephardic tradition. When he ruled on matters of law, he followed, the Rif and the Rambam, and also the Rush. I mean, the Rush was Ashkenazi, ended up in Sfard, but the Mechaber typically follows the Rambam and Sephardic tradition. He says that he follows the 3 great rabbis, the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rush. But again, the Rif and the Rambam, that's like, the 2.5 cantors, or it's a 2.5. It's the Rambam and the Rif are both Sephardi, and the Rush is half Ashkenaz, half Sfard. Started his life in Ashkenaz, in Eastern Europe, in Germany, and then because of the Rindfleisch massacres, he fled to southern France, and then he ended up in Toledo in Spain. The Rush was the chief rabbi in Toledo in Spain the last 20 years of his life. But so the Mechaber, am I right, Greg? Greg, great to see you. Thanks for joining. Am I right that the Mechaber of Yosef Karo wrote the Shulchan Aruch in the 1500s, and typically Rav Yosef Karo follows the Sephardic halachic authorities. The Sephardim follow the Mechaber. Now, Ashkenazim will also follow the Mechaber if there's no disagreement on many things. The Ashkenazim agree with the Sephardim, and we agree with what the Mechaber writes. So the Mechaber wrote the Shulchan Aruch, but the Ramah wrote glosses and comments on the Shulchan Aruch. He was actually preparing his own sefer at the time in the 1500s, The Ramah lived in Krakow, but the Mechaber of Yosef Karo beat him to the punch and published his book and called it the Shulchan Aruch. So the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserlis, great name for rabbi, Isserlis, right? Isser means prohibition, and every congregant wants a rabbi, right, who's called Isserlis, right? Sugarless, Isserlis, no Isurim, but of course I'm just kidding around. His name was Rav Moshe Isserlis, and he lived in the 1500s, and so he had a decision to make. His decision was: does he write his own sefer, or does he add his glasses to the sefer, to the book of the Shulchan Aruch? And this way, that's a more humble move, and also unifying. And that's what he decided to do. He called his. Would anyone know what the Ramah called his sefer, even though it was written as glasses to the Shulchan Aruch? So whenever he agrees to the Mechaber, he doesn't say anything. And whenever he disagrees or he wants to quote, he wants to say an opinion, or he wants to quote the Ashkenazic custom, so then he presents it. So he called his book the Sefer Hamapa, the tablecloth. Right? So Rav Yosef Karo wrote the Shulchan Aruch, the set table. He wanted to make it very easy for Jews to understand the law. And it's based on his lengthy Beit Yosef commentary on the Tur. Rav Yosef Karo felt it would be very, very difficult for people to learn the lengthy commentary of the Beit Yosef on the Tur. So he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take the conclusions of my commentary, the Beit Yosef. I'm going to condense it, crunch it down into quick pops, quick nuggets on what the law is. And this way, every single Jew will be able to just, like a set table, will be able to just review the Jewish law. Still, of course, many Jews don't get around to learning the Shulchan Aruch. But anyway, the Ramah wrote the Sefer Hamapa, the tablecloth, and that's part of the Shulchan Aruch. You have Mechaber Ramah. Mechaber usually follows the Sephardic custom, and Sephardim follow the Mechaber. And the Ramah quotes the Ashkenazic custom, and Ashkenazim of modern times, since the Ramah, typically follow the rulings of the Ramah over the Mechaber. So, who would you expect? Who would you expect the Mechaber to follow?
Maimonides.
We would expect that the Mechaber would follow Maimonides, would follow the Rambam, and that the Ramah would follow Tosfot. Tosfot are the Ashkenazic rabbis in the 12th century. What's interesting and fascinating, really, about this halacha is that the Mechaber follows Tosfot. Rav Yosef Karo rules in accordance with Tosfot that you just light one Chanukah per household. The Ramah disagrees with the Mechaber and follows essentially like the Rambam, that you should light multiple Chanukahs. The Ramah is a little bit different than the Ramah, but essentially he's following the Rambam. And the Ramah says that every single person in the household, whether it's 1 or 2 or 10, every single person should light parallel to the number of nights. The Taz, in his comment on this paragraph, who's the Taz? The Taz was the son-in-law of the Bach. Who's the Bach? Okay, he's not a musician. Bach was the Rav Yoel Circus, who wrote a commentary called the Bayit Chadash on the Tur. When you have the Tur is a beautiful, beautiful set. I have it on my shelf over here right behind me. This is the Tur. It's a beautiful set. It's one of my favorite sets. I actually taught a chassan in New York, and he bought me this beautiful set of the Turs. And on the Tur, so it has here, the middle is the Tur, and on the right side is the Beit Yosef, and on the left side is the Bayit Chadash. So the Beit Yosef, as I said before, was written by Rabbi Yosef Karo. And that's called like the House of Joseph, written by Rabbi Yosef Karo. The Bach wrote a new commentary. He called it the New House. Thankfully, he didn't call it the new and improved house, but he called it the new house. He called it the Bach. The Bach, the son-in-law of the Bach, was the Taz. The Taz, the Turei Zahav, who's a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. And that's that set over there. But I'm not going to take it down from the shelf. And the Taz his commentary is found also on the side of the standard editions of the Shulchan Aruch. And the Taz writes like this. The Taz, that's short for Turei Zahav, says, Chideshu mashalom matzinu b'shar mekomot. This is an anomaly. And this is something new that we don't see anywhere else. I mean, there are a couple other places that we do have it, but this is very unusual. It's very unusual, he says, that the Mechaber, Rav Yosef Karo, rules in accordance with Tosfot. The Mechaber is a Sephardi rabbi who usually quotes Sephardic tradition, and he's quoting the Ashkenazic rabbis of Tosfot. Right? The Mechaber says you should light one Chanukah every single night, one Chanukah per household. The third level is building on the first level, and the Ramah, who usually quotes the Ashkenazic customs, follows the Rambam, and that every single night there are multiple Chanukahs, that every single person living in the household lights in accordance with the number of nights. So he writes, Chideshu mashalom matzina b'shar mekomot. Very unusual. It's an anomaly that we have it this way. And Ron, this is what you said earlier, right? You said that Sephardim light one menorah. That's right. The position of Tosfot.
And they go by according to Mechaber, because... And
they go according to the Mechaber, that's right. Yeah. So the question is, why should this be so? Why did it develop in this way that Sephardim follow the Ashkenazic rabbis of Tosfot, and that the Ashkenazim follow the Sephardic ruling of the Rambam? And that's right, Sephardim light one Chanukah, and Ashkenazim, every single person in the home tries to light a Chanukah. So,
sorry.
By the way, I wanted to mention that some of these sources and the layout of the Shiur is based on a Shiur I once heard from Rabbi J.J. Schachter. Want to make sure to give my Rabbi J.J. Schachter credit for some of these sources and for the overall idea. So Rav Katzen Ellenbogen was a rabbi in the 1700s of Ahu. Ahu, you don't have to say Gesundheit, and Ahu is not a band, that's the Who. Ahu stands for Altena, Hamburg, and Wandsbek. Rav Katzen Ellenbogen was the rabbi of those three communities in northern Germany in the 18th century. He has an interesting theory as to how it developed for this law to be so unusual that the Sephardim follow the Ashkenazim and the Ashkenazim follow the Sephardim. He wanted to say like this, that the experience of Spanish Jewry was different than the experience of Ashkenazic Jewry. And in each case and in each region, they had their easier moments and they had their rough challenges. But Rav Katzen Ellenbogen wants to say, and he's writing in Germany, in Ashkenaz, that in Spain, that Spain followed Tosfot because of the historical circumstances, that they were aristocrats and accepted citizens in Spain. Now, of course, we know that the Rambam in the 12th century, he and his family and many Jews were either forced to convert or to flee or be killed. We, of course, know about the Spanish Inquisition, Spanish expulsion in the end of the 15th century. We know that things were not always rosy in Sfard, in Spain either. Rav Katzen Ellenbogen, however, maintains, and he suggests, and I think there's evidence for this, that overall there was extended periods of time, there were stretches of time in Spain where the Jews felt comfortable, where they were accepted citizens in society, and there was a much lower level of persecution in Spain. For that reason, that's why the Sephardim were able to do what when it comes to Chanukah? What were they able to do?
Light as much as they wanted.
Thank you very much. Well, they were able to light as much as they wanted, but they were also able to do what? They were able to fulfill the mitzvah in the ideal way by lighting outside. They were able to light by the entrance of the house, as we said earlier, right? You light the mezuzah on one side. I mean, you put the mezuzah on one side, and you light the menorah, and you put it on the other side. This is the way they fulfill the mitzvah in Eretz Yisrael, even in some places diaspora. But Rav Katzenel Bogen maintains that in Spain, they had the custom for an extended period of time to light the Chanukah outside. If you're lighting outside, then the main publicizing of the miracle is for the pedestrian walking on the street. This has other implications in terms of when you're allowed to light. You're supposed to light at a time that people are still walking outside.
Yeah.
If you're lighting outside, Marvin, and the purpose is to publicize the miracles for the pedestrians outside, then you have which concern? Then, in that circumstance, you have the concern of Tosfos. Am I right? Tosfos says that we don't want to confuse people if
So
they're
you
not going to
light on
realize what night it is, right? If you have people walking along the street, and they may be not that observant, and they don't really know that much about Chanukah, or maybe it's non-Jews as well, right? We're publicizing the miracles for Jews, maybe also for non-Jews, but they're going to see 6 candles. They don't know. They don't know. Is it the third night? Is it the second night? Is it the first night? How many people in the house? Tosfos says that you light one menorah because we don't want to confuse people who are looking at the candles. So this is a concern, Ron, if you're lighting outside.
Right.
And so the Rav Katzenel Bogen suggests that in Spain, because of the historical circumstances, because of their situation,
Yeah.
they felt comfortable enough to light the menorah outside.
There was under.
Sorry, unmute yourself, Ron.
It was under the Muslims in the Golden Age in Spain, where they had complete religious freedom. You had Rabbi Yehuda Levi, Shlomo ben Gvirol, all those people actually wrote, and they had complete religious freedom. They could do that, It's called
That's right.
Golden
But
Age.
but in Ashkenaz, Rav Katzenel Bogen suggests, they always felt insecure about their existence in Ashkenaz. There were times there were expulsions, there were persecutions. Of course, there were terrible moments over the course of the centuries, culminating in the horrors of the Shoah in the 20th century. But at least in the earlier centuries, Rav Katzenel Bogen suggests that in Ashkenaz, they never felt that sense of religious freedom, Ron, that you were just talking about. And they always felt so uncomfortable and so, not at ease, that they always lit the menorah inside the house. There were times that they actually lit in the living room or in the dining room or in the basement. The Gemara says that at a time of danger, at a time of persecution, you're allowed to light the menorah inside the house. If you're lighting the menorah inside the house, then the primary publicizing of the miracle is not for the pedestrians on the street. The publicizing of the miracle is for the members of the household. The members of the household are fully aware. The members of the household are fully aware of how many people live in the household. And therefore, you can have multiple menorahs, right? Because the individuals are the ones who lit the menorah. And they have an understanding of what night it is. For that reason, that's how it developed. That's how this anomaly developed. Tosfot was concerned about the heker issue, about people getting confused. And so he said, light one Chanukah. But the Rambam felt that no, that you should light, that every single person should light parallel to the number of nights. And he apparently wasn't concerned about the heker issue. Just that was their positions intrinsically. How did it develop over the course of the centuries that the Mechaber and Sephardim follow Tosfot? What Rav Katzenel Bogen is suggesting is a very interesting theory that over the course of the centuries, Sephardim accepted Tosfot because they were lighting outside, and Tosfot had a very compelling reason for those lighting outside. So you shouldn't confuse the pedestrians with the number of candles. But over the course of the centuries, the Ashkenazim followed the Rambam because we were lighting inside. If we're lighting inside and we're publicizing the miracle for the people who live inside the house primarily, then there's no concern about people getting confused. Those who are living in the house know full well how many people are lighting and how many nights of Chanukah it is. And so therefore you could do the mitzvah in the best possible way, where every single person lights the 6 candles plus the shamash. Now, what we do in the 21st century, what we've done the last couple hundred years, for a long time, we're comfortable lighting in the window. So we light inside, but by the window. Even though we're lighting by the window, so we're trying to fulfill both. We're trying to publicize the miracle for those living inside, but also those living outside. But halachically speaking, my friends, the primary publicizing of the miracle is for the people inside the house, which is part of the reason why it's okay to light late at night. It's number one, there are a lot of people. There's still going to be people on the street with electricity, even if it's late at night. But number two, since it's really for you and the others inside the house, you could even light when there's nobody walking still on the street. And according to many poskim, even if there's nobody else in the house or everyone else is sleeping, you still can light because you're lighting inside and you're lighting it for yourself. And even if nobody else is up, you could light. But I think that's just a very, very interesting explanation, kind of like getting in history, sociology, in explaining this anomaly when it comes to Chanukah lighting. Yes, Ayala.
So my question is, you mentioned the word about the Sephardi people in Spain, aristocrats, and that's why they followed the Ashkenaz, which was to light outside. It kind of got mishkabibbled. You said they had
let me explain. Tosfot says light one Chanukah.
Right.
Tosfos is kind of like writing inherently, intrinsically, the mitzvah is usually done outside. And Tosfos said, so light one Chanukah. That was Tosfos' statement. And the Rambam took his view and said you should light multiple. But I'm now explaining that over the course of the centuries, what happened was that the Sephardim accepted Tosfos' view. Why?
Okay.
Because they always were lighting outside. If they were lighting outside, then the reasoning of Tosfot is very compelling. And so Sephardim over the course of the centuries, and then in the 1500s, it was codified, we're going to follow one Chanukah. It happened to be the view of Tosfot, who was an Ashkenazi rabbis, but Tosfot was just expressing their opinion. If you're lighting outside, you should light one menorah. Tosfot doesn't get into lighting outside or inside. He just says, do one menorah because it might confuse people. Typically, the Mechaber will follow the Rambam and the Rama will follow Tosfot. And then it'll, and that's how it develops. In this case, it developed differently. What I'm suggesting is it developed differently because of the different experience of the Jews in that in those respective regions. Does that make a little more sense?
One more question. If we light 2 menorahs in our household, let's say it used to be the kids each lit one, nobody's home anymore, but for a long time I didn't light, only Moti lit. And then I said, but I'm supposed to also light. So I started does it matter if the spouse, the wife, lights all the time a second menorah, or once you start, you got to keep going, or is there a law about that?
Ashkenazim, as we've been discussing, follow the opinion that each person, if possible, should light the Chanukah candles. However, the Mishnah Berurah says that the exception to that is the spouse. He says because Baal ke'ishto, ishto kegufo, that the wife goes together with the husband, and there's one menorah that's lit.
Yeah.
That was the Mishnah Berurah's position, and if you follow that position, I guess then they would light one menorah, and I guess traditionally speaking, it would be the man to light the Chanukah. But I think it's fine, and in our home, we've always followed that, which is that all the kids, every single kid lights a menorah. And me and Jordana, together we have one menorah, and usually, almost always, I light, but once in a while, Jordana has lit for the two of us, and she's the one who lights the menorah for the two of us.
But But
Rav
if it's just the two, yeah.
Rav Soloveitchik disagreed with the Mishnah Berurah. Rav Soloveitchik felt that no, that the wife could light on her own. Every single person lights, and the wife, the Eshet Chayil, yeah, they're married, they're a team, of course, but she's her own individual who has her own responsibility of mitzvot, and she can light and should light on her own. So the Mishnah Berurah says they should light as a team, one menorah, and Rav Soloveitchik felt that no, that each of them could light, the husband and the wife. Ayala, yeah.
What?
Ayala, makes sense?
It makes sense, yes. I'm just wondering, it's like once yes, once not, it's not a terrible thing. Or is it?
It's
that once you
not
start, you should really follow it.
Once you start what?
Lighting. Since the kids are out, I started lighting a separate menorah because there weren't so many menorahs on the table. But for many years, I had no problem just lighting one menorah for the two of us.
I think that's absolutely fine. I think you should go for it. I encourage you to continue lighting. As I said, that was Rav Soloveitchik's view, which is that the woman is obligated in Chanukah candles, and so why should she have to fill it together with her husband? She could light on her own, felt Rav Soloveitchik. The fact that you did it for many years where you lit one menorah because you had the kids in the house. Now the kids are not in the house, and you want to increase the candles, so now you're lighting as well. I think that's great. I think you should continue doing that. Yeah,
okay.
Ron.
Okay, so there was another period in history with insecurity, and that was during Passover. Remember, they used to use only white wine instead of red wine because of the blood libel. And, it was very similar, but even worse, The other thing is, I want to talk about the miracle of the oil. Nowhere does the miracle of the oil mentioned. And I'm going to explain my position. It's not mentioned in the Torah. It's not mentioned in Maccabees. It's not mentioned in the Mishnah or Gemara. The only place where it's mentioned is an outside Braita to Masechet Shabbat. Where in the Scolio, in the notes to it, it mentioned that miracle of the oil, which later became part of the Braita, but nowhere else. Now, the reason why the oil became the main story of Chanukah and not the winning of the Maccabees is, of course, during the Roman period and afterwards, in exile, you were afraid to talk about military winning of Jews. And so you made the story of the oil the more important story, not the other one, not to get the people mad at the Jewish people who lived in their countries. And the last thing is about the fact we have in Israel so many other customs that we don't mention in America. Like we have different foods for Chanukah, something called spinja or spinge. Same thing, but you have sugar and honey on it, just like the sufganiyot, We also have a holiday called Eid al-Banat, which is for feminism, and in the Arab community too, where you have, of course, Yehudit, and you have Hannah and her 7 sons, remember, and Yael and Dvorah and Esther. And, it's a special holiday just for the women. And the Arab community took it over now, and they celebrate with the Jews together, Eid al-Banat, the holiday of the women. So we have a lot of other customs in Israel, which we don't hear about here,
Thank you, Ron, for sharing all of that. Always interesting. In terms of your first point about the miracle of the oil is found in the Gemara. The miracle of the oil is discussed in the Gemara. Of course, the miracle of the oil in Chanukah is not mentioned in Tanakh because the events. In
Masechet Shabbat, in the Braita, not in the actual.
No, but that's found in the Gemara. It's found in the Talmud. It's found in the Babylonian Talmud.
Shabbat, yeah.
And in Masechet Shabbat in the Babylonian Talmud,
right.
It speaks about the miracle of the oil. But in terms of, you're right, that the miracle of the oil, according to many commentaries, is that miracle, it's more symbolic of other things. It's symbolic of the military victory, symbolic of the restoration of political sovereignty.
Right.
It's symbolic of the perseverance of the Masorah, the capacity to fight for the tradition and for the victory of Torah over Greek wisdom. So you're right in the sense of that there's other themes of Chanukah, that the miracle of oil that's part of our tradition, and the Gemara says that the oil that was supposed to last one night lasted 8 nights. But there's certainly other themes, larger themes of why it's 8 days and other ideas behind Chanukah. I'll just end with the point, which is that we call the holiday Chanukah. Chanukah is for Chanukah HaMizbeach. It's the rededication of the altar or the rededication of the temple. Right? Chanukah is the word that's used in the Torah for the dedication of the Mishkan. And that's a simple reason why this holiday is called Chanukah. The Gemara says, in talking about the miracle, says, Chanukah, Chanu b'chafei. They rested from their victory on the 25th of Kislev. And last week we mentioned about why they chose the 25th of Kislev, because that was the day of the ultimate desecration. So they chose that to be the day of the sanctification. But another idea that I once heard is a chet, a neirot, the halacha kebeit Hillel. There's 8 candles, and we follow Beit Hillel to always go upwards in number, to light parallel to the number of nights, but to go upwards in holiness. And the last one is Chanukah, chet neirot, chet nun vav chafei, chet neirot, vi'al kulam, and above all of them, hashamash is the shamash. And this teaches us the idea that as we're lighting the Chanukah, and whether it's one person who lights it, whether if you're blessed to live with other people in your household, then there's multiple people who light the menorah. If you're lighting, and if you're alone in the household, so you see the neighbor's lights across the street, and you call your family member or your friend, hopefully over Chanukah, and you're able to connect in that way by celebrating Chanukah together in that way. But as we light the Chanukah candles, it's also that we're trying to spread light to other people. Yeah. We're trying to bring light to the world and help other people. So chet neirot bi'al kulam hashamash, the shamash is above all of them because the shamash lights the other candles. So too we should be like a shamash to serve the community and help other people. Okay, Laila Tov, Yashar Koach. Thank you so much.
I just want to share my shirt with everybody.